Hey, here we go again. All right, we talked about patrols and hazards a little bit. Now we're going to kind of sidetrack a little bit for me a while and talk about some OSHA stuff. We're going to talk about OSHA forms and OSHA and what goes on them and all that type of thing. So we're going to start with a kind of depth that we're going to talk about what makes an injury OSHA recordable. What that means, it's recordable on OSHA law. You have to do it. And recordable injuries are a lagging indicator because they've already happened, but they are also probably the most accurate lagging indicator, those along with workers' compensation claims. But what's basically in the hands of the safety professional is the OSHA logs. And he said they are a good lagging indicator because they tell you what happened. So that's a good measure of scorecards, kind of how you're doing or how this plant's doing or how a department or whatever is doing. And so they're very useful and they're mandatory. So you got to do them. So you got to have them anyhow. So as long as it's something you have to do that's outside your regular, you got to do them anyhow. So you might as well use them. And some people might try to fudge a little bit on these, but that's just stupid. If you try to make it look better than it is, and then you have an average year, you're going to look terrible. So when you're doing these OSHA forms in the field, just be accurate. This way you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to fabricate stories if it happens. Hey, you had an accident, it happened. Deal with it. That's about all you could do. I'll never forget when I first started at OK Foods and things were kind of a mess there. And the guy that worked for me, Ben, he was really worried about something. I don't know what it was. We were so far out of compliance on something that he said, what are we going to do if OSHA shows up? What are we going to do if OSHA shows up? I says, man, you know what? We're going to do our best right now to get back things in better shape than it is now. And if OSHA shows up, we'll deal with it then. And years later, he told me that he always remember that, we'll do what we can now. And if something happens later, we'll deal with it then. Well, OSHA's probably going to happen to you sooner or later, in the form of an OSHA inspection. We'll talk about them too. So that's kind of the topics we're going to we're going to talk about in this module. So let's get started with what we call an OSHA recordable injury, because not all injuries need to go on your OSHA log. But so what makes a workplace accident or injury OSHA recordable? I love this guy. Our goal, zero disabling injuries. Last year, our goal was 26 disabling injuries. In retrospect, that was a mistake. We had to injure 9 employees to meet the goal. Okay, it's kind of funny, but why you would have a goal of anything other than 0 as far as injuries go, beyond especially lost time injuries or disabling injuries. You're going to have little injuries no matter what. You can't have 0 unless you're a small outfit. As long as you have people. So, all right, this is 29 CFR 1904.7, not 1910, because this is a little bit different. So this is the basic requirement here. You must consider an injury or illness to meet the general recording criteria and therefore to be recordable if it results in any of the following: death, days away from work, restricted work or transfer to another job, medical treatment beyond first aid, or loss of consciousness. You must also consider a case to meet the general recording criteria if it involves a significant injury or illness diagnosed by a physician or other licensed healthcare professional, even if it does not result in death, days away from work, restricted work or job transfer, medical treatment beyond first aid, or loss of consciousness. Now, that last section about that significant injury, they're talking about something like cancer or something like that. You might not have that right now happen to it, but that's what they're kind of referring to. So we're going to talk about the first things in red there: death, days away from work, and all those. And that's what there are certain specific things that make an injury OSHA recordable and must go on your OSHA log. So how to decide if a case meets one or more of the general recording criteria? Well, again, if it's one of these things, and that's all the subparts. And we're going to talk about, I'm not going to read them all again, just read them. So we're going to talk about each one now. An employee's death. Well, this is one you hope you never have to do. You must record an injury or illness that results in death by entering a check mark on the OSHA 300 log in the space for cases resulting in death. You must also report any work-related fatality to OSHA within 8 hours, as required under 1904.39. Now, the OSHA 300 log in the additional resources section that you'll see in the bottom of this or at the end of this, all listed modules, you'll see the OSHA logs in there, the OSHA forms. I suggest you download them, print them, or at least have them available to you during this module so you can look at them and go through them. So you know what I'm talking about. We'll talk about each one, but right now, the OSHA logs where you record each injury. So when they talk about that's what we're talking about. OSHA recordable means it goes on that OSHA 300 log. And again, work-related fatality within the OSHA within 8 hours, as required by that section. How do I record a work-related injury or illness that results in days away from work? When an injury or illness involves 1 or more days away from work, you must record the injury or illness on the OSHA 300 log with a check mark in the space for cases involving days away, and an entry of the number of calendar days away from work in the number of days column. So it's days away, calendar days. So you count weekends or anything. If the employee is out for an extended period of time, you must enter an estimate of the days of the employee will be away and update the count when the actual number of days is known. So they're going to be off now and you're filling your log, and you know the doctors put them off for 3 months. So you can put in there 90 days and for now, and if it changes later, you can always update it. There's no problem at all. We have an OSHA log with making changes to it if information changes. When you can just scratch out the whole thing or rather overwrite the whole thing and scratch over it and do another entry, make it. That's okay too. OSHA doesn't have a problem with that. Now, do I count the day which the injury occurred or the illness began? No, you begin counting days away on the day after the injury occurred or the illness began. How do I record an injury or illness when a physician or other licensed healthcare professional? Now, for now, every time they say in here, physician or other licensed healthcare professional, I'm just going to say physician, that the worker stay at home, but the employee comes to work anyway. And now on these couple of scenarios, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them because I don't think this ever happens. If you have somebody that the licensed the doctor says they must stay at home and they come to work anyway, you're stupid if you let them come back to work. Because they get hurt again, now you got a problem. If the doctor says they stay away, they stay away, period, end of discussion. Or why do you have a doctor? All right. If you're doing that, then you might as well you're just stupid. Now you might talk to the doctor and tell them that you have light duty or stuff like that. That's fine. And we've done that a lot. And you might let the doctor know what you might send them have a job description for this light duty. That's a good idea because you don't want people to stay away. Not because it looks bad on your OSHA law, because they're at home and they don't ever want to come back because they've been used to sitting home collected. All right. So that, and we used to say in California, there was an attorney called Larry Parker, and he had this one ad, this motorcycle guy, Larry Parker got me $8 million. And he played that all the time. So we said, well, you don't want somebody sitting home watching Larry Parker commercials. So if physician says the worker stay at home and the employee comes work anyway, you don't let them work. That's just ridiculous if you do that. How do I handle a case when a physician or other licensed healthcare professional recommends that the worker return to work, but the employee stays at home? Now, this is a little different situation. They're supposed to come to work. Doctor said it's okay. They stay home. In this situation, you must end the count of days away from work on the date the physician or other licensed healthcare professional recommends that the employee return to work. Now, you stop counting. Now you got an HR problem on your hands. You probably have to go to them because now there's no medical reason for the employee not to come to work because the doctor has cleared them. So now that's a whole different issue beside the OSHA law. You got to count this as absent. You have a policy. That's not part of this discussion, but it'll be a discussion that you'll probably be involved in. But that's an HR issue now. But it's not a safety issue because you're going to stop counting as if they were coming to work. How do I count weekends, holidays, or other days? You must count them all. It's calendar days. Okay. So, it's pretty simple. You count calendar days, not work days. So you count weekends and holidays, all that stuff. How do I record a case in which a worker is injured or becomes ill on a Friday and reports to work on a Monday and was not scheduled to work on the weekend? You need to record this case only if you receive information from a physician If the employee should not have worked or should have performed only restricted work during the weekend. If so, you must record the injury or illness as a case with days away from work or restricted work, and end of the day counts as appropriate. I don't think this has ever happened to me before, but you can always call the doctor and say, they'll be back can they come back to work Monday? And they say, okay, well, we're going to be off Saturday and Sunday anyhow. So that's one of those things that might happen. You need to know there's something in there about it, but I wouldn't commit it to memory. That's for sure. How do I record a case? Oops. I'm going backward here. There you go. How do I record a case in which a worker is injured or becomes ill on the day before scheduled time off, such as a holiday, a planned vacation, or a temporary plant closing? You need to record a case of this type only if you receive information from a physician or other licensed physician that the employee should not have worked or should have performed only restricted work during the scheduled time off. So it's kind of the same scenario. If so, you must record the injury or illness as a case with days away from work or restricted work, and end of the day counts as appropriate. Is there a limit on the number of days away from work I must count? This is important. You ought to know this. Yes, you may cap the total days away at 180 calendar days. You are not required to keep track of the number of calendar days away from work if the injury or illness resulted in more than 180 calendar days away from work and or days of job transfer or restriction. In such a case, entering 180 in the total days away column will be considered adequate. I guess OSHA figures that that's serious enough. It's 180 days. That's half a year off, just about half off of work. So they cap it then, because what's the point after that? So that's good to know. You need to know that. May I stop counting days if an employee who is away from work because of an injury or illness retires, leave the company? You sure do. That's it. They're done. They quit on their own. They're not fired. They've quit and they've got another job or they're retired. You stop counting that days because it's kind of out of your control. They took it out of your control. So you just stop that. Now, if the employee leaves your company because of the injury or illness, then you estimate it. And if they leave it because, then that's a whole messy issue. And there's times when these things get kind of muddy and you might have to talk to the doctor, you might have to talk to HR. So, but basically if they leave of their own free will and accord, then just stop. If a case occurs in 1 year but results in day away during the next calendar year, do I record the case in both years? No. You never put the same injury on the OSHA log twice. All right. You record it once, and then for the year in which the injury illness occurred, that's when you record it. If it happened on December 31st of 2021, that's when you record it. They can be off all of 2022. It doesn't matter, but that's the date of the injury. If the employee is still away from work because of the injury or illness, when you prepare the annual summary, estimate the total number of calendar days. So if it happens on December 31st, you have to have your OSHA summaries posted by the end of January, and they're still off and you don't know, you just estimate it. That's all you can do. Then you can update it as needed. Again, you can always do these in pencil and change it, or you can write them out. I mean, it's not, they don't care about it as long as it's accurate. The main thing is it has to be accurate. And nowadays you're probably going to do it electronically anyhow. And you can do it on those forms that if you download the forms that are in there in the additional resources, the OSHA forms, you can do those electronic right on your computer. How do I record a work-related injury or illness that results in restricted work or job transfer, but does not involve death or days away from work? So this person didn't die, thank God, and they didn't have to get off work, but the doctor says they have restrictions. So record it and you place a check mark in the space for job transfer or restriction and an entry on the number of restricted or transferred days in the restricted work days column. Now, how we handled that is pretty simple. Most of the time in most companies, and this is pretty much the way it was at OK Foods, when an employee comes to work, they're usually going to do the same job. Not always. Things change, production changes, schedules change, different people are absent and have to be filled in for. So it was reasonably expected that when you came to work, an employee came to work, they would work for that supervisor in that department. So as long as they were still working in that department, we didn't consider it a job transfer restriction because they could have been doing that work on a regular day anyhow. So you can hash that out however you want to, but that's how we did it. I never had a problem with it. How do I decide if the injury or illness resulted in restricted work? Or restricted work occurs when you keep the employee from performing one or more of the routine functions of his or her job. That's kind of hard to find sometimes. Or from working the full workday that he or she would otherwise have been scheduled to work. Now if they're only allowed to work for like 4 hours, then that's restricted. Or a doctor or physician not perform one or more of the routine functions of his or her job, or not work the full day that he or she would otherwise have been scheduled to work. So now let's see, I think we're talking about this in a minute. What's meant by routine functions? For record-keeping purposes, an employee's routine functions are those work activities the employee regularly performs at least once per week. So I don't know too many jobs like that, but there could be, do something once a week, but it could be. And have like Fridays might be inventory day or something like that. Who knows? Do I have to record restricted work of a job transfer if it applies only to the day on which injury occurred or the illness began? No, you don't count that for just the one day. And it's, again, if you, with a physician, impose a restriction or transfer only for the day which injury occurred or the illness began, you don't count that. A lot of times somebody gets hurt and they come back to work, you might say, all right, let's just let them take it easy the rest of the day. That happens, so you don't, that doesn't count as a job transfer or restriction. If you are a physician or other licensed healthcare professional recommends a work restriction, is the injury or illness automatically recorded as a restricted work case? All right, they recommend it. Now, it doesn't make it, no, automatically restricted. No, a recommended work restriction is recordable only if it affects one or more of the employee's routine job functions. To determine whether this is the case, you must evaluate the restriction in light of the routine functions of the injured or ill employee's job. If the restriction from you or the physician or keeps the employee from performing one or more of his or her routine job functions, or from working the full workday that would otherwise work, the employee's work has been restricted, you must record the case. That really didn't add too much to the conversation, did it? How do I record a case where the worker works only for a partial work shift because of a work-related injury or illness? This is kind of redundant. A partial day of work is recorded as a day of job transfer or restriction, except for the day on which the injury occurred. Kind of like they already covered that, huh? Now, here's an interesting one. If the injured or ill worker produces fewer goods or services than he or she would have produced prior to the injury or illness, but otherwise performs all the routine functions of his or her work, is the case considered a restricted work case? No. The case is considered restricted work only if the worker does not perform all the routine functions of his or her job, or does not work the full shift that he or she otherwise have worked. So you have an employee on a production line, and they're the sorting chicken as it comes down the line, and now they have an injury and they can't do it quite as well as they used to. That's okay. They're still doing it. So that's not a restriction if they're doing less production or like that, as long as they're doing it the full shift. And if you're working overtime, you want to make sure your people that are on, if they're on restriction, they can work overtime too. You can't penalize them for that. How do I handle vague restrictions from a physician or other licensed healthcare professional, such as the employee engaged in light duty or take it easy for a week? I suggest you find a new physician. That's what I suggest. They need to know this is the job related, and they need to know a little bit about what you do there. They ought to come visit you. You ought to have a clinic that you rely on to know a little bit about your business too. So if you're not clear, you can call them. Say, hey, what the heck is going on here? And then light duty or take it easy for a week, meaningless. But let's see what it says here. If you're not clear about the physician, ask the person whether the employee can do all of his or her routine job functions and all work. The answer is yes, then it's not a work restriction. If the answer to one or both questions is no, then it's restricted work must be recorded as a restricted work case. If you're not able to obtain this additional information from the physician or et cetera, then you record it. Here's what I think you should do in this case, other than get a new physician. Okay, we had one time this lady, I forget what her injury was, but she comes back from the doctor, back to the nurse's station with a piece of paper from the doctor, and said they're usually have like unable to lift more than 10 pounds or something like that. Well, it said unable to lift more than 0 pounds. I called the doctor, and I said, doctor, I told him who I was and told what it was about. I says, you violated their restriction. You gave them a piece of paper to bring in here, and that weighs more than 0 pounds. It might weigh 0.01 pounds, but that's more than 0. Oh yeah. He said, yeah, I probably should have put 5 pounds on there. I get that they didn't want them lifting very much, but you can't sign the paper without lifting more than 0 pounds. So sometimes doctors supposed to be smart people. Sometimes you wonder. Anyhow, I would call that doctor, and I would have a job description for some light duty or something like that you might want to send to the doctor. Okay, can they do this? But it depends on your company policy too. Some people don't policy. Some companies just want to let them off. I don't care. That's bad. I think it's bad policy. I think you want to keep them at work, make them feel like they're still part of the operation and everything. So make them feel like they're still earning money. Now, remember, when they're on workers' comp, workers' compensation is mandatory in all states. And so this is good. If it's a work related, they happen to work and you're filling out this form, it's probably going to be compensated. So that means it's going to workers' compensation, and really that means it's compensable when it's paid for by workers' comp. You have recordable goes on the OSHA law. Compensable means it's being paid for workers' comp. They're almost always going to be compensable and recordable. Almost always. There's a few instances, and they're really on the fringe, like parking lots or something like that, where they may be compensable, not recordable, recordable, not compensable, but that doesn't happen very often. So, but when they are on workers' compensation, now each state varies on workers' compensation. So, usually, and I think every state I've seen it, what they do is they take like a 10-week average, and your workers' comp people can get this from payroll, whatever, and they'll report it. They know what to do, and they'll report their average earnings for like a 10-week period, and it may vary, but I think that's pretty standard. But and that includes like overtime and everything else. Their average for this 10-week period, previous 10-week period, and that's what workers' comp is going to use to pay them, and they're going to get paid 2/3 or 66.66% of that every week. Now it sounds like they're getting screwed out of 1/3 of the pay, but no, because there's no taxes taken out of it. So that's what they do that. So they're getting home, they're getting paid, maybe not quite as much as they would have made. I don't know how that works. That 66% number works. I've never collected workers' comp, but you really wouldn't want them to come to work and getting paid their full amount and still be part of the team, in my opinion, anyhow. What do I do if a physician or other licensed healthcare professional recommends a job restriction meeting OSHA's definition, but the employee does all of his routine job functions anyway? I would say, who's running this show? You, or your management, or the employee? All right. If a physician tells the employee, gives restrictions to an employee, and it's in writing, and it's, the doctors know what they're doing usually, and you should not ever let that employee do something that they shouldn't be doing. The restriction, you're just asking for trouble. The restriction's there for a reason. This person was injured on the job, and the doctor says they shouldn't do this, lift over 10 pounds or whatever. Don't let them do that. That's pretty simple. And if you get recommendation from 2 or more physicians, well, here's what happens a lot of times. They go to the emergency room. In the emergency room, they don't care. I mean, I don't care about getting, but they don't care about the paperwork. They don't care about the workers' comp thing. They know they're going to get paid, because you have to pay them through workers' comp. And so they're going to take them off work 2 months. Well, they've just seen this person now and they don't really know. So what we would do, if they told them to take them off work for 2 months, we would get them when they come out. That's probably going to be a pretty serious accident. Let's say they took them off work for like 10 days. And so we would get them, but when they got okay, they'd get them to our doctor, our clinic that knows us first, as soon as we can, and let them set the restrictions in, because they know what we can do. They know they can call us. We can talk to them. We can talk about restrictions and try to get them back to work. I hope the company wherever has a real liberal back to work policy, because I just think that's good practice for your employees and your company. So anyway, what it says here, you should ensure that the employee complies with that restriction, or else you're an idiot. Okay. Why do you have a doctor for? If you're not a doctor, what are you trying to tell this doctor? He doesn't know what they're doing. Like I said, you can disagree with the doctor. That's fine. But you call the doctor, you talk to him about it, you send them documentation, have them come over, whatever. But whatever they say, you got to do it. I mean, that's why they're going to a doctor. How do I decide if an injury illness involved the transfer to another job? Again, I kind of covered that. If they're still working in that same department, and we didn't consider it a job transfer, but if they had to go to another department to meet that restriction they had placed on them, then we did consider that. Are transfer to another job recorded in the same way as restricted work cases? Yes, both job transfer and restricted work cases are recorded in the same box on the OSHA log. So that's pretty simple. How do I count days of job transfer or job restriction? You count days of job transfer restriction same way you count days away from work. The only difference is if you permanently assign the injured employer to a job that's been modified or permanently changed in a manner that eliminates the routine functions the employee was restricted from performing, you may stop the day count when the modification or change is made permanent. You must count at least one day of restricted work or job transfer for such cases. In other words, you could change their job, take away those permanently changed, that eliminates the routine functions that they can't do anymore. All right, you can do that. How do I record injury illness that involves medical treatment beyond first aid? All right, you must record it on the OSHA 300 log. If it did not involve death, 1 or more days away from work, 1 or more days of restricted work, or 1 or more days of job transfer, you enter a check mark in the box for cases where the employee received medical treatment but remained at work and was not transferred or restricted. What's the definition of medical treatment? Here we go. It's going to get, starts to get a little more involved. Medical treatment means the management and care of a patient to combat disease or disorder for the purposes of Part 1904. Medical treatment does not include, this does not include visits to a physician or other licensed healthcare professional solely for observation or counseling. Doesn't happen very often in workers' comp cases or on the job injuries. The conduct of a diagnostic procedure such as x-rays and blood tests, including the administration of prescription medications used solely for diagnostic purposes, such as eye drops to dilate pupils. So that's a diagnostic procedure. X-ray, not considered first aid. X-ray, just an X-ray. You're just taking a picture. Okay, first aid, that's defined in paragraph B5II of this section. Oh, there's a word over there. Okay, which is here. What is first aid? All right, here is what is first aid. Using a non-prescription medicament at non-prescription strength. So now some medicaments are available in both prescription and non-prescription form. And so if it's in a prescription strength, then it counts as a prescription. I've never seen it happen. If it's a non-prescription medication, we just call it a non-prescription medication, to be honest with you. Administering a tetanus shot, tetanus administrations, other immunizations such as Hep B or rabies are considered medical treatment, but a tetanus shot is considered to be first aid. So a tetanus shot does not make, in and of itself, does not make it recordable. Cleaning, flushing, or soaking wounds on the surface of the skin, using wound coverings such as bandages, band-aids, gauze pads, etc., or using butterfly bandages or steri strips. Other wound closure devices such as sutures, staples, etc., are considered medical treatment. So band-aids, butterfly bandages, steri strips are first aid. Sutures, staples, etc., are medical treatment. Hot or cold therapy is not, it's just first aid. Any non-rigid means of support, such as elastic bandages, wraps, non-rigid back belts, etc. Devices with rigid stays or other systems designed to immobilize parts of the body are considered medical treatment for recording purposes. So it's non-rigid means of support. Usually what that means is kind of like temporary, and usually when they put you in something rigid, it's more permanent. Using temporary immobilization devices while transporting an accident victim. Split slings, neck collars, backboards, etc. My guess is if you need that being transferred, you're probably going to be OSHA recordable anyhow, but there it is. drilling of a fingernail or toenail to relieve pressure or draining fluid from a blister, using eye patches, removing foreign bodies from the eye using only irrigation or a cotton swab. So you just water it out when you cotton swab. Why would you use a cotton swab? I would think you'd get cotton in your eye, but irrigation sounds like it might be a good idea. Removing splinters or foreign material from areas other than the eye by irrigation, tweezers, cotton swabs, or other simple means. So if you get a splinter and pull it out, a pair of tweezers, that's just first aid. Finger guards, first aid. Massages, physical therapy, or chiropractic treatment are considered medical treatment for record-keeping purposes, but massages aren't. I don't go figure. Drinking fluids for relief of heat stress. So somebody becomes overheated and you give them some Gatorade or something like that, which you hope you'll take it before they get there, but that's just first aid. That's just considered first aid. And are any other procedures including first aid? No, that's it. The complete list of all treatments considered first aid for purposes of Part 1904. You got to have a pretty good handle on those. But what happens is only three or four of them come up for over years and years. And then what happens, it's been 5 years since you looked at that. You might have to look it up. That's why you have OSHA logs. I mean, OSHA books are online. Now, does the professional status of the person providing the treatment have any effect on? No, it doesn't. So the professional status of the person who treats doesn't matter. Similarly, OSHA considers treatment beyond first aid to be medical treatment, even when it is provided by someone other than a physician or other licensed healthcare professional. Now, why you're letting someone other than a licensed healthcare professional, physician, treat your patients is beyond me. What if a physician or other licensed care professional recommends medical treatment, the employee does not follow the recommendation? Now, this could happen. So if a physician recommends medical treatment, you should encourage the injured or ill employee to follow that recommendation. However, you must record the case even if the injured employee does not follow the physician. Again, you send them to a physician for a reason. It should be a physician that you trust, and you trust that is fair, looks at everything, and doesn't look just what the employee says, doesn't look just what you say. It's somebody that's going to be fair. And so if you're doing that, then you have to go with it. I mean, go what they say. So you should, this is follow recommendations. So you should encourage them and not let them, if it's in your control, go with outside whatever the physician says or other licensed healthcare professional. Is every work-related injury, illness case involving a loss of consciousness recordable? Yeah, you'd pass out if you're knocked out. It's recordable. Doesn't matter how long you remain unconscious. Now, what is a significant diagnosed injury or illness that is recordable under the general criteria, even though it does not result in death, days away from work, restricted work or job transfer, medical treatment beyond first aid, or loss of consciousness? Work-related cases involving cancer, chronic irreversible disease, a fractured or cracked bone, or a punctured eardrum must always be recorded under the general criteria at time of diagnosis by a physician or other licensed healthcare professional. And then notes to this, which is hard to see right now. I'm going to get out of this for a second. OSHA believes that the most significant injuries and illnesses will result in one of the criteria listed 1904-7A, death, days away from work, etc. Getting back up there. However, there are some significant injuries, such as a punctured eardrum or a fractured toe or rib, for which neither medical treatment nor work restrictions may be recommended. In addition, that's okay. Somebody worked in an office and they break their toe. Well, guess what? They can probably do their job. In addition, there's some significant progressive diseases, such as byssinosis, silicosis, and some types of cancer, for which medical treatment or work restrictions may not be recommended at the time of diagnosis, but are likely to be recommended as the disease progresses. OSHA believes that cancer, chronic irreversible diseases, fractured or cracked bones, and punctured eardrums are generally considered significant injuries and illnesses and must be recorded at the initial diagnosis, even if medical treatment or work restrictions are not recommended or are postponed in a particular case. Well, OSHA 300A summary of work-related injuries or illnesses. Note that this summary must be posted from February 1st to April 30th of the year following the year covered by the form. And if you don't remember that, that's not fine. That's fine because it's right on the form. And that's it for the OSHA forms. I hope you downloaded them from the additional resources. And you'll see there's a couple of other things there you probably want to download and maybe print again. But so we're going to talk more about this in this module, but that'll handle this part of it for now. So be safe.